Hey friends, welcome to But What If You Did, the podcast where we share the empowering, encouraging stories from millennials thriving in the messy transitional seasons of life. I'm your host, Allison, and I'm a millennial on a mission to show you what's possible when you stop playing it safe and lean into those uncomfortable growth seasons in life. These conversations are literal proof that you too can go from surviving to thriving. It's about building what I call your mindset toolkit and taking action even when it feels hard. And well, on that note, time is our most valuable resource. So grab some coffee and let's get to today's conversation. Hey friends, welcome back to another episode of But What If You Did, the podcast where we share the empowering, encouraging stories from millennials thriving in those messy transitional seasons of life. I'm Allison, and I'm just really grateful for another week to share another cup of coffee over another empowering story from a millennial thriving in the messy middle. Before we get to today's conversation, I know many of you have been asking for updates on how things are going in my new position with my corporate job. So I thought that I would take a minute to share a couple of the things that I've observed, noticed, learned over the last couple of weeks. The first of which is that projects always seem to have the same problems, which is just really interesting to me because I just don't understand how we don't learn from things we've done wrong in the past and apply them moving forward. But perhaps this is why I don't understand corporate. So what I've noticed is the game is really in learning to quickly identify patterns and then kind of having that toolkit of tested systems and methodologies on the side that you can just easily pull from that are already tested and can be implemented and maintained really easily without a lot of effort. And that's how you solve and fix problems and eliminate patterns pretty quickly. So that's been a big learning for me, or at least a big observation. The second is that relationships really are everything. I know the last couple of weeks we have talked an immense amount about soft skills and how important they are because you can't teach soft skills. And they are something that you have to practice, and you have to practice a lot. But stepping into this new position has been so much easier because of relationships that I have built with a number of individuals across a number of different organizations over the last decade of my career. So don't ever discount the taking the time to get to know someone, getting to know a little bit about them, how they got to where they are, learning their story, because in the long run, that's going to help move you forward too. The third is that you don't have to know everything. And I know that we've also talked about this a lot lately, but really, what you do need to be able to do is really listen and absorb information and then kind of synthesize that information and be able to regurgitate it in a way that garners trust amongst larger groups of people, right? So I have definitely stepped into a role that is a little bit above where I feel like I am skill-wise, but I am doing my best to listen and take notes and ask really thoughtful questions and admit when I don't know something, but also ask for ways to better learn those things. So you don't have to know everything, but you do have to be able to absorb and learn and listen and grow along the way. And the next is I really thrive when I'm not being micromanaged. And after 4 years on a project where micromanaging was a preferred leadership style, it's been really rewarding to kind of work with a group of individuals that really trust me and trust my expertise and give me that space to really step into my highest self. Part of me thinks that this is really just the Enneagram 8 in me, really liking that I have more consistent control over what I'm doing and I'm trusted to know what is best for me to do and how I'm going to stay most efficient throughout the workday and most productive. And just having that trust has honestly helped me with my own self-trust challenges. That's been really good for me. And also, the last thing that I want to just touch on is that projects will still move forward with or without you, no matter what. No matter what happens, no matter what life throws at you, they're still going to move forward. So I think sometimes we get caught up in this idea that we have to if I don't stay late today, this thing isn't going to get done, or this can't wait till tomorrow, when in reality, it can. It can always wait till tomorrow. We're not rocket scientists. I mean, maybe some of you are. Maybe some of you do work for NASA, but we're not rocket scientists that are sending a man into space. We are also not a surgeon that has a human open on a table. Maybe you are. I'm not. So you can choose to do everything in your power and overwork and kill yourself to overachieve something, or you can choose to come in and do your job to the best of your ability as your highest self for 40 hours a week and still go home and maintain that work life balance or that work life integration, however you want to look at it. So just remember that that choice is yours. And at the end of the day, the project is still going to move forward, regardless of how over the top you feel you need to be. And on that note, friends, it's I think about time to get to today's conversation. So today I sit down with Asha Wilson from the Wilson marketing firm. And Asha, like so many of us, found herself unemployed as the world went into lockdown. This was unfortunately not Asha's first time facing a layoff as a result of a large world event. And yeah, she has a really empowering story of how she decided to take control of her life and to really make some positive change. When I first met Asha, it was really wild how parallel our stories felt and also how different they were. One of my favorite topics of conversation that came up in the conversation was this idea that millennials are lazy. And it's this myth that I think so many of us are so accustomed to facing and coming up against in our corporate environments. But most importantly, I think my biggest takeaway from the conversation was about learning to absorb the loss. And now this is just another tool in my mindset toolkit that I know has really had an impact on how I've navigated some crazy situations over the last couple of weeks. So I think it's really going to resonate with you guys too. All right, friends. Well, thanks for coming to hang with me for a bit today. And on that note, let's get to today's conversation with Asha Wilson.
All right, friends. Well, I'm so excited for today's conversation. Before we get into it, I'm going to warn you that we just tried this and I don't really know what happened, but the recording kicked me out and said absolutely not. So we're going to redo the first 14 minutes of this episode and see where it goes. On that note, welcome to the podcast, Asha. I'm so excited to have you.
Thank you so much. Absolute pleasure. Thanks for having
So,
me.
I would love to dive into a little bit of your story first, give you the opportunity to share with my community who you are, what you do, and also tell them a little bit about how our stories have maybe paralleled each other a little bit through the pandemic of the last year.
Awesome. Well, my name is Asha Wilson. I'm CEO and founder of the Wilson Marketing Firm. And how has even transpired? So I've been with the company I was at was a Fortune 500 corporation, and I was doing their marketing. I was in their marketing department, and you know, little pre-pandemic, we were, the company was kind of seeing what was going on, and it was in the travel industry, so of course they're really keeping things monitored. And come February, March is when they're starting to talk about doing certain layoffs and furloughs, and so of course marketing is one of the top ones to go. So, yeah, I've got furloughed, then was laid off. And so initially there was that sense of panic. There's a sense of fear because, for me, I just purchased my house. I, just got all this furniture, all these things, and then now what? So, I took some time, like everybody else, finding jobs, applying, polishing my resume that hasn't been polished for years.
Mm-hmm.
And then, I was just getting so tired of competing because the rest of the world is doing the same thing. They're trying to find the job, they're trying to get new income, and then let alone be remote. But
Right.
it was just really difficult, and I just said, okay, so I took some time to reflect, and it became apparent that it was just necessary next step to just open or reopen my business. And so I reestablished the Wilson Marketing Firm this year as a digital marketing agency because I was like, well, I was doing this. It's not like I
Right.
left. It's not like I didn't want to do what I want to do. So I wanted to carry and still do what I was doing, just helping other businesses in this case. So
Doing it on your own terms.
facts.
I think we've seen a lot of that in the last year of
Yes.
it's not that I was unhappy in what my job responsibilities were. It's that
Hmm.
I maybe realized that corporate America isn't the right place for me, or this company wasn't
Yes.
the best um, fit from a culture perspective, or like I think it
Hmm.
just 2020 really pulled back the curtain for a lot of us on the things that were working well in our lives, but also the things that maybe weren't working so well.
Hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, I think as someone who also had to very heavily dive into the job search. I think at first when this all happened, like you said, like you kind of took that like quiet time of like, okay, like we were lucky that with 2020, the CARES Act funding kind of helped to sustain people on
Hmm.
unemployment for a period of time. It really gave us a chance as a generation to be a little more introspective about, like you said, like polishing our resumes that probably hadn't been touched in many years, doing some research on organizations we'd be interested in working for, finding the job postings that we were interested in posting for. And I think that in doing that, we got to a point where it was like, okay, I've now been out of work for a few months. Now it's time to start applying for things. It's time to
Yeah.
start looking. And we were quickly met with a lot of hurdles and a lot of roadblocks, in that a vast majority of the country was also posting for those jobs. And
Hmm.
you being skilled was not enough anymore. And it became more about who you knew and who could get you an interview. And, things that I think a lot of people maybe didn't realize where a lot of companies were posting positions even though they weren't actually hiring. They
No.
were
It's
interviewing people
crazy.
saying, well, this is for in the future when we need something. Or, there were so many little caveats to the job
Hmm.
search that I think, it's very easy for people looking in to have said, yes, go find the new job.
You're right.
It's time to move on. But for those of us living it in real time, we were kind of up against this larger this larger barricade, this larger wall of
Hmm.
it's not that easy to just go find another job. This is
Exactly.
not what it was a year ago. So, something that I know I came across a lot was just this perception about a lot of perceptions about millennials as a generation at large. And something that I noticed and that I hear people say a lot is, well, but millennials are lazy.
Yeah.
And I think that that is completely not true. And I think that there's a lot of reasons that that's not true. But I know that that's something that you've also heard a lot and something that you can maybe relate
Yeah.
to. So I would love to talk about what your experiences are with the whole millennial myth that millennials are lazy.
It's crazy, just even thinking about it. There's like those who are saying that are the generations who obviously had a different, um, you know, experience growing up. Thinking about even in the World War times, baby boomers and the Gen X, and they're like, okay, well, we had to work, we had to start from the bottom and climb our way up, and to them that's their perception of real work, their
Mhm.
perception of achievement and accomplishments. And it is to see somebody come from humble beginnings and work their way up, um, and that's the mindset that everybody has, to have that consecutive achievement for success, right?
Yeah.
And so when millennials are coming in, we're it's interesting because they would say that we are trying to cut corners, we're trying to, make it easy, we're picky and this and that, but honestly, it's just a new way of achievement. Instead of having to go through the steps, instead of us going through entry level, then the next level, then the next level, we're actually trying to find those shifts faster, because we've realized that being more efficient is effective to achieve what we have. We also grew up with hundreds of thousands of dollars of debts. And so in our minds, we're like, we don't have time. Our parents, may have, you know, um, went to college or all this and that, but the prices at that time are nothing compared to what it is now, and people are having to work most of their lives trying to pay it off, and unfortunately that's not the goal,
Yeah.
at all.
Well, and I think too, like that's why, you see less millennials that own homes. You see less millennials having children. This is, it goes back to that cost benefit analysis idea, right? Where we are, we come into the job market, you take the entry level position, you struggle to move forward, you're like, all right, well, I guess I go try it again. And then you go try it at a different company, or, your parents say, okay, well, you should stay loyal to this company. So then you're like, okay, the next one, I'm going to stay here, and I'm going to stay here. But in the meantime, you're paying on income-based repayment on your student loans because you can't afford to make any more than that income-driven repayment. And it's now a decade later, 15 years later, I'm one of four, and my siblings have all paid off their student loans, not because they had any less or any more than I had, but because I came into the workforce right after the financial crash.
Yes.
And came in substantially lower pay. I didn't make six figures out the gate like one of my siblings did, right? And so what they were able to afford and to pay off is just different than what our generation has been able to accomplish. And I think,
Absolutely.
like you said, the efficiency piece it's interesting to me because millennials were the generation where technology kind of came into play, right? So technology shows up, well, all of a sudden we get to middle school, and now we have to take typing classes, and we know what typing is, and we're using our dial-up internet to search for research for our homework assignments, and we start to engage in technology. But because of the way that we learn technology, we've learned to be we're really good problem solvers, and really good at like, okay, well, there could be a faster way to do this. Let me go try this, or let me go learn this new thing. And so, like you said, I think what is sometimes perceived as cutting corners is actually millennials learning new systems and just learning to make their jobs more efficient, not because they don't want to do it, but because that is the trajectory of the world right now.
Exactly. Absolutely.
So when you went from, your first layoff back in 2008 around the financial crash to, finding your next job after that, I know you said it took you a really long time to find that. And I think that first of all, there's the mental Olympics that go with that of like, why can't I find a job? I'm not good enough. So you're dealing with the negative self-talk, the self-worth concerns, which I think is a big thing for a lot of millennials. But then you finally find the job. And how do you deal with feelings of maybe like feeling replaceable, or like you're not going to be able to hang on to something long term, or those kind of, feelings, emotions that kind of come along with transitioning from like, okay, now I got to get back into the market.
Yeah. It's crazy, the whole idea of the replaceables. I think even baby boomers had this fear, being in the job market for so long. But, when that fear starts to creep in, you start to find yourself doing anything and everything to stay relevant, right? You find yourself doing too much, learning. And obviously, learning is not bad, but it's just the fact of you're trying to do your job, you're trying to absorb more information, you're trying to, stay ahead of the game and maybe step on some toes in the meantime, like, because you have the hunger to reach the top and to stay, relevant to your company. But, some things where I think what people should think through, especially, is to look for the other opportunities, right? Because when you have other opportunities, that actually is an opportunity for you to not be replaceable. Why? Because now your job knows that they could lose you and it's not on their terms.
Yes.
So knowing that you're taking the steps, that, two steps ahead of the game, they're thinking, okay, well, we might create some layoffs during this and that. So they're already planning that. Whereas you're planning your next steps like, hey, I'm only making 50 here, but I'm going to see if there's other opportunities and then to use that in the negotiation process. And so, for people who are thinking like to stress themselves out, there is a different way. There's a strategy that you can use. Us millennials, not cutting
Yeah.
corners, but being resourceful and efficient, thinking ways. And that's why a lot of people are bouncing from job to job. Well, it's not necessarily job to job. It looks like that on paper. It's opportunity to opportunity. I'm just
Yes.
finding it in different ways. So that's some way that you can kind of flip the script on that.
I love the idea of flipping the script. I think that is so important because I think, something that this was the first time that I have faced being furloughed for a lengthy period of time. I felt like my career was very stable up until that point. And overnight, you realize you are actually a number on paper, and maybe you were more replaceable than you actually thought that you were. And, I think we've seen this cultural shift, this mindset shift with our generation of as they're trying to go back into the workforce, they're not as keen right now to grasp at the first job that gets laid in front of them. They are, like you said, using those negotiation skills and using what they have and taking that and showing other companies why they're more valuable to them because of those things, and really kind of using those skill sets that they've acquired to their advantage. And like you said, I love the idea of like looking forward, of like, hey, I'm not going to think about this as I could be replaceable. I'm going to talk about this as if I'm not replaceable to them, and I'm going to show them why. I'm going to go show other people why I'm valuable and then see what they're going to do to keep me. And I think it's a game, and I think this has come up in a couple conversations lately about like, we all think that we suck or that like, I don't know, the universe is rigged, right? Like it just, everything is rigged.
Right.
But if it's rigged in our favor, we're going to go a lot further than if we play it like it's rigged against us. And
Absolutely.
that is totally a mindset shift that we can choose to make for ourselves.
Right.
So something else that I've really come up against lately quite often, and I honestly, something that I deal with a lot myself, is this scarcity mindset around everything. And for me, the scarcity mindset is definitely financial driven. But I think it can, it can impact relationships. It can impact just how, career growth and finances. And like, it really could just go in so many different directions. So where have you felt like you've struggled with a scarcity mindset, and how do you think that that's kind of propelled you down different paths in life as you've kind of learned to confront it and shift your mindset around it to more of an abundance mindset?
Oh, so that is interesting. I think that's a great encompassing question because, I too have struggled with that fear of being replaced, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, I'm a single mother. I have my responsibilities, right, to be able to maintain and to have that level of security.
Yep.
And any fear, really, anything fear driven causes, well, it's dependent on how you react, but it causes you to make a choice, right? When they talk about that fight or flight, it's either you're going to allow it to consume you or you're going to allow it to propel you.
Yeah.
And so for me, the fear of being replaced may have come at a cost, a sacrifice, of my time. I did go after my MBA. I did take the literal steps to go through thinking that was the right way. And then, but also seeking opportunities,
Yeah.
in the company, so if there were others, like I'm going to look for it, but that was just the way that business was going. But I feel like the shift happened when I realized that there really isn't a scarcity. I think people have to realize that, and even in the business world, the more I'm growing with this, it's like there's not really a lack in anything. And what I say is that there are jobs or you create it, right?
Right.
So you eliminate any scarcity in either one. And if you decide to go into business, right, then you're starting to say, well, okay, you can either be that person's like, well, it's a saturated market, or everybody has opportunity because we can target whomever we want. And if we're all like individuals, so people are just going to be attracted to you as a person. And so the more I started to realize that, the more opportunities started opening up, is because I'll tell you this quick story. I didn't even complete my MBA, but I was in this role that I was just not happy in.
Mm-hmm.
But, I was openly thinking about doing my MBA, or I was currently pursuing it, and was transitioning to the corporate side. And nobody from operations to corporate, like it was very difficult to get into corporate.
Mm-hmm.
But the more I was like, you know what? I literally opened up my mindset to believe that this isn't a scarcity. If people can get there, there's got to be a way. And literally, I applied for something but got a completely different yet better position as a result. And so it's just, you really got to learn to train your mind that there isn't really a scarcity. It's just, maybe it's just a different way to approach it. Maybe it's a different way to go after it.
Yeah, I think it's, it's the idea that there's enough opportunity out there for everyone.
Absolutely.
And for me, working on affirmations and stuff, like I know a lot of people feel like affirmations are really taboo, or like they don't really understand them, but for me, money is a big thing. So I constantly have to remind myself, money flows to me with ease. Like the money will come when I figure it out. Like, but being afraid to not take a risk on something because of the financial implication is going to hold me back in life, and is not going to allow me to live into my purpose and to live as my best self. And so it's like you said, it's learning to see things from an abundance mindset of like, there is an abundance for everyone, and everyone has a space, and everyone can find a place. And, if you are open to seeing it, the universe will present it to you. You just have to be open to seeing things in new ways.
I would even touch on that, because even as you were talking, I just was thinking about investments just in general, and how they say high risk, high return. And the high risk is just going after the opportunity, and sometimes not even knowing whether or not you qualify. And that's exactly the thing that I did. I didn't think I qualified, but I did it anyway and ended up getting the job. And it's just a matter of just going after it. Same things that you would see in the stock market or any investments you do. You're just going to put in your money and hope for the best.
Yep.
And it might go up and it might go down, but it hasn't stopped people from continuing to do investments. So it's one of those things where you go after the opportunity is an investment in yourself. And the additional investment is that affirmations, as you said, pouring into yourself, pouring into that positivity, which allows to open your mind.
It's interesting because when you were talking about, going for that job that you don't necessarily meet 100% of the qualifications. I think that, we've all seen the statistics that say that girls are less likely to post for something where they don't feel like they meet all the criteria. And my boyfriend was looking at, some job postings recently, and one of his friends had said to him, if you're posting for a job that you already meet all the qualifications for, then you're probably overqualified and you're probably not going to learn anything from the job. And I thought that was so interesting, because I think that people don't think about it from that perspective. I was also having a conversation recently with someone where we were talking about why, in a job, learning to, when you're applying to jobs, learning to present your soft skills is so much more important than learning to represent your hard skills, because you can teach someone hard skills. You can't teach someone soft skills. And so I think so much of it is a mindset. Like it really always goes back to mindset. And I know that that's really hard for people to kind of wrap your mind around at first, especially because it takes a lot of practice, a lot of really hard practice day in and day out to make these mindset shifts. They are not instantaneous. They do not happen overnight. But when you do make the mindset shift, like you said, you start to see the abundance of opportunities. You start to see that, wow, if I really went after this job, maybe I could show them that these communication skills that I have are really what they're looking for, and they're going to teach me the rest, or it's going to open the door for something else. But if I'm 100% qualified, then maybe this isn't the right job for me to be posting for in the first place, because it's just a lateral move. So I think it really goes back to that perspective. So I love that you touched on that as well, because that definitely has been something that's like been ruminating in my mind lately. And I think it's something that a lot of millennials could stand to be reminded of. So something else that we've talked about is that, millennials are becoming more and more willing to kind of give up security in order to follow and go after the things that they love. What has been your experience with that?
So the very fact that I opened my business was the biggest risk, yet the biggest reward, because of that very notion. And, now that things are starting to open back up, and even before then, when the pandemic was just breaking out, it brought into my spirit, just said, do I really want to go back to corporate life and then to start all over again, and then to go through the motions of proving yourself, air quotes, and then, going after. And I was just like, you know what? Honestly, I love the fact that I can be at home. I love the fact that I can wake up and calmly start my day without having to rush into it. I love the fact that I can now be with my daughter and not have to be spread so thin, rushing out of my 9 to 5 to go pick her up and go home, make dinner, and then knock out. There was just no real quality of life. And now my experience has been I couldn't even imagine going back. I can't imagine it. Now I can create my own wealth. I don't have to be laid off. I can pick and choose who I want to work with. And it's all giving me life. Mm-hmm. It's giving me life.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people can resonate that, especially if they're not really entrepreneurial driven. They want to go back to a job that's remote. They don't want to go back into the office. They want to be able to control their schedules and see their families, and maybe being able to do some. One of my friends has been talking about, now that she's staying at home, she's open to the idea of homeschooling, so that they can now travel more, right, and go freely and not being confined to both schedules of the school system and the work system. So it's just, I think this pandemic has allowed people to really see what is more important. And now, if they call us lazy, then they're really going to call us lazy.
because we all want out now.
Because now we see the light at the end of the tunnel and saying, oh my gosh, that system was never, it was always working against us. Now, if I go back to work, it's going to be, again, on my terms. Is this remote? No? Okay, well, unfortunately.
Right.
And so I think that's where, for me, that sense of being able to have that freedom has been the greatest thing. And now I wouldn't want anything else.
I think it's really interesting to have watched the shift start to take place, because I think that this is still applicable even if you do want to continue to build a corporate job. Mm-hmm. I think where where you're seeing the shift that way is that people are looking more at what a company culture is. If you are in a toxic work culture, people are calling it for what it is, and they're willing to look outside of that and to walk away from it, because not all companies are they are a culture. And something that I learned in one of the very first interviews I did on the podcast was Alicia Campbell she works for Cultural Shift HR, and she was saying how it is so easy to go find YouTube videos on a company's culture now, and how that wasn't a thing that people really had access to before, but now
millennials and Gen Zers, and as the next generation step up into the workforce, they're taking the time to go learn about companies before they want to work for them. I did a meet and greet with someone who was interested in working for my company that I met through the podcast a little while ago. And one of the questions she said is, what is the culture like? And that's someone that's a senior in college, and they're asking the right questions because I didn't know to ask questions like that coming out into the workforce. But also I think that, they're seeing where our generation is and where their parents were, and how much, just culture has become such a huge part of everything that people are wanting to know what that's like, but also it's giving them permission to accept that there is freedom beyond that. And like you said, like, is it that I would rather have a job that allows me to work from home? Is it that I need a flexible schedule, so I need to be able to work when I want to work? Is it whatever? And it's not that they're necessarily against working in the corporate world. It's that they want more freedom. Maybe, there's a lot of startup companies that have unlimited paid time off. And so maybe that's important. Maybe you don't want just 1 week of paid time off for the year. Maybe when you're negotiating, maybe salary isn't important, but extra weeks of vacation is. I just think that there's become this more robust picture that's taken into consideration as people are job searching, that for so long we kind of had pushed out of the way because we were taught that the only way to get anywhere was to overwork ourselves and push ourselves to burnout.
Yes, I absolutely love everything you said, and it's so true. I was just talking to a friend because he was just expressing to me, because he just got a job like maybe a few months. We were working at the same company, just in different departments, if you will. And he got a job like not too long afterwards. Moved to Tennessee and went into a semi-toxic to a completely toxic environment just for the sake of, and he's just miserable, and he's already now saying like, I need to find a place where the culture is right. And I was telling him, I was like, listen, maybe it's just going small, and maybe it's finding an agency or some kind of smaller business that will give you that work-life balance that you need and deserve. Because, at the end of the day, to your point, and I love that you said this, it's not that we don't want to work. It's just like we want to work and live. Like nobody, I mean, my gosh, retirement is what, 65? So you're telling me like I'm going to work from whatever age you might have graduated from college to 65 and then live life? No. Like that's the reason why there's so many people trying to change the trajectory of how this employment situation is, because that sounds ridiculous. It sounds really ridiculous to work 40x years and then live life. Why not be doing that and work, and enjoy life as you're growing? And culture, I remember doing this specific research about how it's become so big, and it's corporations have slowly caught up with this concept. And it was unfortunate that it took the pandemic for them to make that shift, amongst other civil issues. But it's always been said, it's been proven scientifically, if you want to call it science, social science, but it's been proven that culture resonates well with customers. It resonates well for the audience. It now resonates even more for potential employees, because it's important to know where the company stands. If you're going to go and spend X amount of years at a corporation or employment, it needs to be worth the while. I need to be able to take my vacation. I need to be able to feel secure taking vacation and not threatened by it. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
And that's why a lot of people may be hesitant, because I don't want to be going back to what we're talking about, the scarcity and the security factor. Why would I go back knowing that you're going to threaten my job because I want to take time off?
Yep.
I think there are so many, like I said, we just pulled back a lot of curtains on the way the world was functioning in very dysfunctional ways in the last year. And I think that there is less of a mindset of, people just, they're not willing to take good anymore. They want great and they want exceptional. And, I think we also unfortunately learned a lot about loss in the last year. And, whether that was losing loved ones to COVID, losing friends to jobs that displaced them and forced them across the country, that we learned how important life and relationships are. And I think that for our generation, this was such a pivotal point in our lives because we are old enough to fully understand what's happening around us and to have to take full responsibility for us. At the same time, we are seeing the social responsibility to make that better for future generations and to make sure that our kids and our grandkids know what social justice is. They know what it's like to live in a positive culture and not one that's filled with toxicity, and to not be afraid to walk away when you're not being treated right. And I think this has just been such a big learning for so many of us, but I think because of that, our generation is really starting to make moves, and I think we're going to see a really positive change come out, a big change wave come out of all of this.
100%.
So something that you had mentioned when we had talked previously before this conversation was about how the last year kind of taught you to learn to absorb the loss. And I thought that was such a powerful statement. And it's become such an important part of how we've navigated the last year. So I would love to hear a little bit of your perspective on how learning to absorb the loss was really transformational for you.
Yeah. I read this book. My goodness. I should have pulled this up. But I read this book, and this woman was talking about how she was, doing this event, spent maybe 10K on it, and was so upset because, nobody showed up. And she was talking to her dad and was like, this and that. And he told her, it's okay, you can absorb the loss. And that was her aha moment, which was my aha moment. The fact of absorbing the loss is knowing that that's actually the process of removing that scarcity and fear mindset, because now it's saying, okay, when you are dwelling in the loss, maybe it was a job and I won't, or something tangible, but it's just the fact of we can get it back and we can get it bigger and better, and not to really sink into the to the fact of the loss. So to absorb the loss is to say, okay, this happened. I've learned many lessons as a result, which is actually
the life lessons.
Right. So you might have had financial loss, but then now, okay, you could do this differently. It gives you now the freedom, and it kind of circles back to our earlier part of the conversation. It's like, how do we create the win? You create the win by creating a business or going for a different position that you would have never done before because you didn't think that you could qualify, or maybe it's now coming from Fortune 500 corporate job to now going to a smaller scale business that will give you the freedom to do it. These are all ways to absorb losses, right? Because it creates a new pathway, it creates new opportunities, and it creates that new mindset saying, okay, these things will happen, but how do I respond to it? I can absorb the loss, learn, and move on.
It's totally the mindset shift, and that's just a really good way to remind yourself that you can make the mindset shift. We continued to talk about building that mindset toolkit on the podcast, and I think that while it can feel really hard in the moment, and not everything's going to stick with you, not everything's going to resonate with you, not everything's going to be something you remember, especially when you're navigating a hard growth season, right? There are going to be these phrases that come up from time to time, and these concepts and these stories, and that's why I think it's so important to tell other millennials stories of going through the messy middle, because the way that you navigated it and the way that I navigated it might be completely different. But learning to absorb the loss is now something that I will attribute to have learned from you, right? And something that I've learned from another person might have been that I learned to look for the life lesson in something. And so that's what I mean when I say we're building our mindset toolkit, guys, is we're learning these little tips and tricks and these stories that are going to help us remember when things get tough, what exactly we can do to keep ourselves moving forward and to take action.
Right. Absolutely. It's just really, it's who we are, honestly, to go after the things. And when these things take place, it helps, it gives us, it, I shouldn't say help or give, it makes us scale back and not really embrace who we are and who we can be. And so it's just, when you can come out of that and allow yourself to see, okay, there's going to be trials, there's going to be highs and lows, but life still goes on.
Yep.
And don't be replaceable. Like, I say that because it's just like at the corporations or businesses, you're just a number. Mm-hmm. So in this case, we're all just like, now I want to actually I don't want to be a number. I want to actually have a life and love and live it. And so those setbacks, those times that make us pause should be the opportunity for us to now, I don't want to sound cheesy, but reinvent ourselves.
No, but it is. We want to see, when we look back, everyone says, you're born alone, you die alone, right? And like when you reflect back on your life, what difference do you want to have made in the world? And I just think that overall, we're becoming more in tune with that. And our generation is becoming more purpose driven and less about being financial driven or, career driven, or like what we want to be known for is the impact we made on those around us. And we're starting to get really clear on what that means for us and how we're going to do that for the rest of our lives. We still have years and years and years ahead of us. We're still young and we can still have that ability to change trajectories and to do it because we're nimble and we're resilient as a generation. And I think that the hardships of the last year have taught us just exactly how capable we are.
Absolutely.
So something that I think most millennials are pretty terrible at doing is giving themselves credit for how they navigated the messy stuff in life and how they made it through a really hard season. So I love to wrap up every conversation with my favorite question, which is, when you look back a year from now, what do you think you'll be most proud of yourself for?
Absolutely. I really want to say this business. And why I say that is just because for me, that was the biggest, like, out of the comfort zone move. Mm-hmm. And I'll just quickly say, I started this business in 2016, but it was just it was a completely different model than what it is today. And I wanted to play it small and say, oh, I just want to consult people. I don't want to do. And then I had a coach who told me, no, make it a full-fledged agency. And I was like, oh my gosh, like,
you're like, okay,
how do I get this? But, I figured it out, and I was able to, I'm still figuring it out because there's, an agency versus like a coaching business versus this business, they're all different and they're ran differently. And so there's still lots to learn from an agency perspective, but I would say the biggest thing is just me being able to flow and all the things that we talked about today, and just going from, temporarily being in the scarcity mindset to now operating in that abundance, knowing that I walked this thing out.
I love that. This has been such a fun conversation. I have truly enjoyed sharing this time with you and getting to share your story. And I really hope that you guys, if you take anything away from this conversation, it's that you learn to absorb the loss, learn from the lesson, and move forward, because you are absolutely capable and worthy of way more than you think you are. Don't downplay what you're good at and just go for it. And on that note, friends, thank you so much for joining us today, and I will see you right back here, same time next week.
Just wanted to say a quick thank you for coming to hang with me for a bit today. If today's conversation vibed with you, I would so appreciate if you took a few seconds to subscribe, rate, and review. This really helps to get the podcast into the hands of new listeners. For show notes and links to all resources discussed in today's conversation, head on over to butwhatifyoudidpod.com/listen now. Remember, friends, it's truly on us to inspire the next generation of changemakers. So I'll leave you with a little food for thought. It's one thing to change our world. It's another to change the future.